Are you going to have full autonomous on the roads of Austin by the end of June?
Yes.
You are. What gives you that confidence?
We have cars driving 24/7 with drivers in the cars, and we see essentially no interventions. So we want to be very careful with the first introduction of unsupervised full self-driving, meaning that the car's driving around with no one in it. So we're going
no one behind, but drivers.
Well, yes, and sometimes no one in it at all. It's going to pick someone up. The car seems to be incredibly safe. So we have thousands of cars that are being tested, which is creating some strange situations where we just drive. There's just a bizarre number of Teslas driving past people's houses. They're like, what's going on?
We even saw one last night coming from the airport, driving at night alone. Looked very lonely.
Yeah, it's looking good for Austin next month.
Yeah, some estimates have been that you're only going to have 10 to 12 of them on the road initially. I mean, it's going to be a very small amount. Is that correct?
Yeah.
How do you see it ramping up?
Well, we'll have to see how well it does. But, I think it's prudent for us to start with a small number, confirm that things are going well, and then scale it up proportionate to how well we see it's doing.
Right. And what's going to be a judge of how well it's doing?
Are there any incidents? Are there any interventions? But we want to deliberately take it slow. I mean, we start with 1,000 or 10,000 on day one, but I don't think that would be prudent. So we'll start with probably 10 for a week, then increase it to 20, 30, 40. And I think by, say, we'll probably be at 1,000 within a few months. And then we'll expand to other cities, so expand to San Francisco, California, Los Angeles, San
Is that
Antonio.
a real possibility in the not too distant future? I mean, Texas is very different than California when it comes to regulation. They don't really have much here in terms of dealing with autonomous, but it's a different story in California.
California's already approved. Waymo has been doing autonomous driving in California for a while. Right now, the approval process is very haphazard and sort of state by state and sometimes city by city.
We were talking to the Secretary of Transportation about that very fact a moment ago.
It's going to be important to have a unified set of national regulations for self-driving cars. Otherwise, you're going to get into this weird situation where if you're driving from Maine to New York, you're going to go through 10 different sets of regulations. Cars are going to behave differently. It's not going to make any sense.
No.
So one set of regulations that, just like there is for highway driving, that's what I think makes sense for the country as a whole. My prediction is that probably by the end of next year, we'll have probably hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million Teslas doing self-driving in the U.S.
What percentage of those are going to be, well, not the cybercab, you're just talking about on full self-driving, level 4?
Unsupervised full self-driving,
right.
You do not need to pay attention.
Right. For me, if I own a Tesla and I have the software and the capability of doing it.
Yes.
Right.
We'll have a model which is kind of like some combination of Uber and Airbnb. So if you're a Tesla owner, you'll be able to add or subtract your car to the fleet. So just like an Airbnb, you could rent out your spare bedroom or rent out your house when you're not using it. And the same thing will be available for Tesla owners. Right. So it's a way for Tesla owners to earn revenue. Instead of having your car sit in the parking lot, your car could be earning money.
You and I talked about that a couple of years ago. Somewhat ambitious target. Why do you have the confidence now that in a year, there'll be 1 million available?
Well, by the end of next year. So it's just more like 18 months.
26, okay.
Yeah, once you have a proof point, once you have it working, then scaling up is just a matter of time. But once it's working well in Austin, then we'll make sure it works well in other cities. I mean, there are obviously some unique cases like downtown New York, but that's a highly unusual situation. Most cities in America are like Austin.
Although you can go on full self-driving right now in New York. I mean, you can obviously have to sit there behind the wheel, and it'll do it.
Oh, yeah, no.
It'll navigate the traffic. I've seen it.
Yes, so even a Tesla that you buy right now, and the self-driving just costs $9 a month, will give you autonomous driving anywhere in the country right now. The question is, when is it unsupervised?
Where you're sitting in the back, so to speak. Right?
Yes, where you're like asleep and the car, you wake up at your destination. Yeah. In order for that to be the case, we want the autonomous car to be much safer than a car driven by a person.
Right. But, again, I'll come to Waymo because even though they only have about 700 cars, they obviously are on the market. They're in Beverly Hills all over the place.
It's proof of concept.
They've got 28 cameras. They've got LiDAR and radar. You've had a different approach. The 8 to 9 cameras and the neural network. Why do you feel that is going to be the equivalent in terms of safety profile?
Oh, I think it'll be better.
Why?
Because the way that the road system is designed is for intelligence, biological neural net, and eyes. That's how the whole road system is designed. So what will actually work best for the road system is artificial intelligence, digital neural nets, and cameras. And we also have the microphones to hear emergency vehicles and that kind of thing.
Right. You need to hear a fire engine or a police car.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
But that's how the whole road system is designed. It's not designed for shooting lasers out of your eyes. And what we found is that when you have multiple sensors, they tend to get confused. So do you believe the camera or do you believe the LiDAR? If you get confused, that's what can lead to accidents. So we used to have, for example, radar in the car, but we found that the radar and the camera would sometimes disagree, and then you don't know which one to believe.
So it wasn't about expense. Are you seeing the data right?
In fact, we turned off the radars in the cars.
You turned off the radar.
Yeah.
So if I were to say to you, all right, let's go, do you think that you're there in terms of the safety profile you're seeing right now?
Yeah, we could take a ride today if you want. Sure.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to take a ride with you anytime you want, wherever you want. Logistics capability to operate sort of a ride-hailing fleet at scale, because you mentioned, obviously, let's call it the end of 26. Are you going to have an app? Are you there? Do you have that ability?
I think we can figure out an app. Somebody tells me.
You're not worried about it?
But Tesla already has an app.
Yeah, I know. XAI can probably do it for you in like an hour.
Tesla can apps just fine.
Do you ever consider licensing the technology at some point?
Yes, there are a number of major automakers that have talked to us about licensing self-driving, and we're very much open to that. I think the more we demonstrate the capability of self-driving, the more that they will want to license it, and we're happy to help.
You know, back to the safety profile, because it's going to obviously be something key focus. I saw this over the weekend. They did a test between Waymo and Tesla.
It's not a real publication.
Regardless of whether
fake.
we want to have a debate about their journalistic integrity. The test itself, let me just share it with you and get your reaction, which was the Waymo, ultimately, they said, proved better, in part only because it avoided, with its geofencing, one very difficult intersection that the Tesla chose to go through. It stopped at a red light, but then it went through the red light. What's your reaction?
Look, I'm not going to comment on some Business Insider article.
But is that a concern at all? Because in a way, there's no geofencing. So it's like it's happy to go on the highways in a way that perhaps a Waymo is not. I guess my question is that a concern at all for you in terms of it encountering things that are still sort of a crucial test and perhaps it fails?
No, first of all, that actually should have been a test of supervised self-driving and not unsupervised self-driving. So the assumption there is that you have a person who is going to take over.
Right.
So their test made no sense.
Okay.
But when we deploy the cars in Austin, we are actually going to deploy it not to the entire Austin region, but only to the parts of Austin that we consider to be the safest. So we will geofence it. Yeah, of course.
Right.
It's not going to take intersections unless we are highly confident it'll just take a route around that intersection.
But there won't be a safety driver in the car.
Correct.
Right? The car, there's not going to be somebody sitting there. But you did have ads for vehicle operator autopilots. What was that about then? Are there going to be people who are remotely sort of monitoring the performance of the fleet?
Yeah.
And what will they do?
So they'll just be, we're going to be extremely paranoid about the deployment, as we should be. It would be foolish not to be. We'll be watching what the cars are doing very carefully. As confidence grows, less of that will be needed.
Again, you spoke about it, and we spoke about it a couple of years ago. And obviously, your investor base, many of whom are watching right now, are interested in the revenue and profitability of this ride-hailing autopilot and autonomous driving opportunity. BYD, I believe at this point in China, is now offering levels of autonomy for free. I mean, are you confident you're going to be in a position to continue to get a premium for that particular level?
Well, interestingly, in China, we're not allowed to train on videos in China. So when we released full self-driving, it was actually just trained on the rest of the world, but not in China. Mm-hmm. And the tests by local Chinese publications, I think, concluded that even without training on local Chinese roads, the Tesla self-driving was the best.
It was the best.
Yes.
But again, I mean, is the technology...
In fact, there's some pretty wild videos where people are doing self-driving, which we don't recommend, obviously, on narrow mountain roads, including one where there's a sharp precipice on either side and no barriers.
Are you regulated to have full... Where are you in China right now in terms of your ability to offer that product, though? Understood.
Unsupervised. We have supervised full self-driving, where there's a person in the car. It has approval in China. But whenever we release a new version, we have to get an incremental approval. And at times, we do have to battle other car companies in China who are trying to stop us from
It's an incredibly competitive market.
China is the most competitive market.
And the extent BYD, which is neck and neck with you, I think, in the EV race, I think it's fair to say, worldwide, correct?
I don't really follow that.
Well, they're willing, again, my question is, they're willing to seemingly offer different levels of autonomy for, I don't want to call it free, but
I don't really think about competitors. I just think about making the product as perfect as possible.
You don't think about competitors at all?
But no, I just think about making what we want to achieve is the platonic ideal of the perfect product. And as long as you focus on that, you will have a compelling product, obviously.
All right. Well, there's a potentially compelling product right behind you, which is the robo-taxi. So when are we, is in 5 years, are they going to be all over the place?
Yes.
They will. You're confident in that?
Yeah.
Talking about Tesla, obviously, takes me to a certain extent to what some would say is the brand damage done by your government service. I don't know if you would agree with that. There have been some pros and cons. We sat here 2 years ago upstairs, And you famously said, when I asked you about this very subject, I don't care. I'm going to say what I want to say, and so be it. Do you regret that? No. Why not?
I believe that we want to live in a free society where people are allowed to say what they want to say within reasonable bounds. Like, you can't advocate for the murder of somebody, but free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy. That's why it's the First Amendment.
Without a doubt. But I guess my question is more about your work at Doge, for example. Was that worth it? To the extent you are now, Elon, you were a somewhat divisive figure 2 years ago, but now you really are. I mean, there are people who love you, but there are a lot of people who dislike you, some of whom were your customers. And I wonder, was it worth the undertaking at Doge and everything else that you've done and how outspoken you've been in terms of the things you believe in to antagonize so many potential buyers and or users of things like a Roboten?
Unfortunately, what I've learned is that legacy media propaganda is very effective at making people believe things that aren't true.
An example of that being?
That I'm a Nazi. And how many legacy media publications, talk shows, whatever, try to claim that I was a Nazi because of some random hand gesture at a rally where all I said was that my heart goes out to you, and I was talking about space travel. And yet, the legacy media promoted that as though that was a deliberate Nazi gesture, when in fact, every politician, any public speaker who's spoken for any length of time has made the exact same gesture. And yet there's still people out there, and I've never harmed a single person.
You know what, Elon? I wasn't
now, you asked for an example.
I wasn't even going to talk to you about it, because in fact, I have a number of people who are close to you, and I called them afterwards, and all of them to a person were like, no way. No way.
Of course not.
But that isn't necessarily the perception. The work you've done for Doge has also come obviously into the spotlight in a great deal. And, people are upset about USAID being put into the wood chipper. People are upset about AmeriCorps disappearing. People are upset about, and this isn't even on your side, the NIH and so many other areas that they feel rightly or wrongly are being cut as a result of your efforts. And I guess I wonder, as you start to transition now back to Tesla in a more significant way.
Any program in USAID that had any semblance of merit was retained and folded into the State Department. So, and if there's some exception to that, we're all ears and we'd love to look at it. We just want to see the evidence that the program was actually doing good and not just funding graft in DC and warlords in some country. Because over and over again, we saw sympathetic sounding programs.
Right.
But when we actually said, well, please show us pictures of the recipients of the aid, or let us get into contact with them. No pictures were forthcoming. They didn't give us any contact information. And we're like, look, we're not going to send money to DC grafters and warlords. That's not a good use of money. So that's not what we're going to do. Now, invariably, when you stop waste and fraud, it's not like the fraudsters admit their guilt. They don't say like, oh, isn't it so great that the money we were getting, fortunately, has been stopped. They will obviously come up with a sympathetic sounding claim. That claim has no merit.
I guess what I would come back to, because I talk about economics all day long, is, to your point you've been making, we have a deficit that's running at about 6.7% of GDP.
Right.
We have interest costs that are going to be above $1 trillion. It's not going down next year. You entered this thinking you could cut as much as $1 trillion. You're nowhere near that. It's not really making the dent I think you may have thought you might have been able to achieve in terms of a true problem. Would you agree?
Well, first of all, it would obviously be ridiculous to assume that we could achieve that on day one. So it's only been, 4 months?
Yeah.
And we've done, by our calculations, improved the deficit by $160 billion.
Right.
That's up,
That's your number that's out there. A lot of people take issue with it and say, well, taxpayers' expenses such as paid leave, that's $135 billion that's got to come back. IRS collection may go down as a result of cuts there. I asked Grok. It said between 5 and 32 billion is what you've actually said.
You need to ask, the right question to ask is, what is the bid for the actions of Doge?
Right.
What would the incremental expenditures be in FY26?
Yep.
Because, for example, we offered severance and early retirement to a lot of government employees. Many of them took us up on that. But that severance went all the way through to September.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be any savings until October.
Right.
Because the severance goes through September.
Understood.
So the delta really is, what is the spending difference FY25 versus FY26 as a function of Doge's actions? That's how we calculate the number. And we'll see if that turns out to be true or not.
I mean, by changing the retirement age or really going after some other parts of the budget?
We've tried to go after every part of the budget. Yeah. Some parts are more boring than others.
You're about efficiency. I mean, that would take an act of Congress, obviously, to really make change.
First of all, so I think, in our opinion, we've created a $160 billion delta, FY25 to FY26, very significant. That's 16% of the way towards $1 trillion in 5 months. And in order to make progress, we need the consent, obviously, of not just the executive branch, but also the legislative branch and the judicial branch. So if we, and we are advisors, we're not kings here.
I get it.
So why are you attacking this, given that we've made so much progress?
You mean not me. I'm not attacking. I'm just asking questions. Yeah. In fact, I want to ask a lot more about Tesla. I do want to talk about Tesla. I mean, I was talking about brand damage and what you're seeing in the market. You did an interview earlier this morning where you seem to indicate you're starting to see a rebound.
Yes.
Automotive revenue was down 20% last quarter. I think 50,000 fewer units were sold in the Q1 versus Q1 a year ago. What is giving you confidence in the automotive business? Or is it all about robo-taxis, as you've been saying, and people can't quite see them behind me, the robots as well?
Really, the only things that matter in the long term are autonomy and Optimus. Those overwhelmingly dominate the future financial success of the company. As for Q1, we had a global factory changeover for the Model Y. So there's a new version of the Model Y that came out, which required a factory shutdown across the world. Model Y is the number one selling car of any kind on Earth.
I watched your presentation during your last, right here, I think.
It's number one selling car in the world. So we can't make cars if the factories are retooling. So the right time to retool is the first quarter, since generally that's when the least demand occurs. But we've seen a major rebound in demand at this point. I feel comfortable.
Major rebound in demand.
Yeah.
Really believe you have seen that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, for most people,
right,
when you buy a product, how much do you care about the political views of the CEO? Or do you even know what they are?
Your goal, you've also said, is to produce 1 million robots, I think by 2030. That's what I had you on the record as saying.
I think that's a reasonable target.
And then start towards sustainable abundance, which you can get into. But, I wonder, we've been talking about autonomous and how long it takes to train the automobile to be able to exceed human capabilities. But what about these robots, to the extent that how much training are they going to need to actually to be able to do various different types of tasks? Is that a long time?
It's going to take a lot of compute resources, and it'll take time. I think there's certain threshold breakthroughs that we think we can achieve, where if Optimus can watch videos, YouTube videos or how-to videos or whatever, and based on that video, just like a human can, learn how to do that thing, then you really have task extensibility that is dramatic, because then it can learn anything very quickly. So I think we'll get there in the next. We're not there yet.
You're relying on a significant uptick in terms of learning and training.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm calling it a very significant threshold. Would be the ability to learn from watching a video.
Right.
But at the point
as opposed to watching a human, right? Which is, or having a human sort of train it right now.
I mean, right now we're training Optimus to do like primitive tasks where a human in a kind of a what's called a mocap suit and sort of cameras on the head is moving in the way that the robot would move to, say, pick up an object or open a door. The basic tasks: throw a ball, dance, and I think that's needed to sort of bootstrap the intelligence so you can have the basic functions. Then where I think it gets very interesting, and very much like humans, is that you want the robot to self-play. Right. So you say, how does a child learn? Well, a child has toys, and a child plays with the toys, plays with the blocks, at some point figures out how to put the triangle in the triangle hole and the circle in the circle hole by doing it over and over again. And this self-play, once you have a lot of robots, you can do this self-play, which is that you just put the robot in a room with toys and have the robot play with toys.
And it will learn.
Yeah, and you have a reward function, say like, okay, the goal of the robot is to put, that classic child's toy, you put the circle in the circle hole, the square, square hole, triangle, triangle hole, and keep doing it until it works. And the reward function is succeeding. And
there are no advances needed to accomplish that? No advances in AI or compute and things of that nature that can happen?
There are some advances needed, but I don't think these are insurmountable. I think we can solve these things in the next few years.
Okay, so at that time when millions of these things are coming off of a line like we just saw with cars, they're going to be fully autonomous. They're going to come off and the way you've described it, they're going to be able to come in my house and I'm going to be able to say, all right, do the dishes. Now I need you to walk the dog.
Absolutely.
Hold the baby.
In fact, you really won't even need to, it'll figure out what you probably want and do what you probably want without you even having to ask.
How many GPUs are you going to need for that?
Well, quite a few GPUs. We do have our own program called Dojo for training, which I think will be helpful.
That's contributing about 5% towards self-driving, right?
Yeah.
Is that the one in New York, in New York State?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in New York. So we expect to still buy a lot of GPUs from NVIDIA, some from AMD, and maybe from others. And as long as NVIDIA is better than what we make, we'll keep buying from NVIDIA.
Is that the case right now?
It is.
Yeah. I mean, you're obviously buying them for XAI, the Memphis, big time, right?
Yeah, XAI is building the most powerful, I think we have the most powerful training cluster in the world right now, which is over 200,000 GPUs training coherently.
You're at 200,000 already now.
Yes.
There in Memphis, that facility that, okay.
Yes.
And where are you going?
And we'll be at the million GPU level in the location just near Memphis.
A million GPUs for a new location or 800,000 additional GPUs?
A million of the next generation GPUs.
So Blackwell.
Well, yeah.
Wait, are you building that now?
Yeah.
How are you powering
It's a gigawatt class system.
Are you?
Yeah.
You do? Natural
But it is a hard problem.
Which is the hard problem? Finding the power.
Getting a gigawatt online.
Yeah.
And actually having the gigawatts of power be reliable, because you get the power fluctuations in the grid and that whatnot. So we're using, actually I just posted something online today, which is a whole bunch of Tesla Megapacks batteries that are important for power conditioning the grid. So the GPUs do not like power fluctuations. They like it power steady. And then if sometimes there's slight brownouts or if there's a blackout, you want to be able to carry through that like an uninterruptible power supply. So we've got a lot of Megapacks there to
support that.
It'll be the first gigawatt class training cluster in the world and the most powerful training
When's
cluster.
When's that going to be done?
Hopefully in about 6 months, maybe 9 months.
Mm-hmm. And that's largely powering Grok.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just powering Grok.
Right, which continues to advance. I mean, I use it frequently.
Yeah.
I saw you using that on the Joe, was it with Rogan, when you were using that mode? What is that mode where it's all sassy and curses all the time?
Well, if you want to have fun at parties, Grok unhinged mode is pretty funny.
Yeah.
It's next level.
Is power going to be the gating issue for our ability to continue to advance in AI?
Yeah, I think a few years ago, I made a very obvious prediction, which is that the limitation on AI will be chips, and it's still kind of chips today. Then it will be electrical equipment because you need to take power that might be at 300,000 volts all the way down to 400 volts for the computer. So you need step-down transformers and a lot of them, and a lot of cabling and wiring and fuses and it's a lot of transformers essentially, and the electrical transformer industry is not used to big changes in demand.
No, there's a shortage of transformers.
There literally is a shortage of transformers, and then funnily enough, the AI algorithm is called a transformer, and then our Optimus robot is named after Optimus Prime. That's a transformer robot.
It's a lot.
So we have transformers for transformers.
Right. But it's the one transformer is the one in shortage that the others need.
And then as we solve the transformer shortage, there will be the fundamental electricity generation shortage.
And are we there yet, or are we going to be there soon?
We're getting there soon. My guess is people will start hitting challenges with power generation maybe by middle of next year, end of next year.
Even with deregulation and effort being made to perhaps move permits along more quickly.
So like how many power plants are getting built and how fast can you build a power plant?
Right. China seems to be building them pretty quickly.
China has so many power plants that have been built and are being built. I don't think people quite realize this. I posted on my X account just the graph of U.S. power generation versus China power generation. The China power generation is like a rocket going to orbit, and the U.S. power generation is flat.
Right.
So I think by the end of this year, China will have about 2.5 times the power output of the United States, and it's headed towards maybe 3 or 4 times the power output of the United States.
Yeah, it's funny when I think about China. I mean, EVs, autonomous, we talked about batteries, solar, power generation. By the way, even biotechnology recently, I don't know if you saw Pfizer's licensing cancer drugs. Are they ahead of us in certain areas that are important?
The United States still has an advantage in breakthrough innovation, but I think it's somewhat of a cultural thing, which is that to have breakthrough innovation, you have to question authority. Fundamentally, your breakthrough, you're questioning the conventional wisdom when you do a breakthrough innovation.
Right.
In China, they don't generally like to question the authority, or that's not as encouraged as it is in the U.S. So
you seem to be good at finding something and then making it better.
Yeah, I do want to emphasize that the sheer number of smart, talented people in China who work very hard is amazing. The amount of talent. I mean, I'm an admirer of China's capabilities. I think most people outside of China do not understand the power of China. It really is something special.
Yeah. In the time we have left, I would like to sort of keep the focus on XAI. First of all, you spoke earlier about wanting more control at Tesla. Would you ever consider merging XAI into Tesla? Would be a way, obviously, they could issue shares to you and conceivably would increase your overall economics. Is that a possibility?
Well, I guess anything's possible, but it would be difficult to speculate about something. Tesla's a publicly traded stock.
I would think to get a majority of the minority vote or whatever you might need might be not easy.
Yeah. It's not out of the question, but that would have to be something that the Tesla shareholders would want to vote for. So.
Understood. But it's not something you're thinking about doing.
It's not currently, there are no plans to do so.
Right.
It's not out of the question, but obviously would require Tesla shareholder support for that.
Another way you could obviously increase your control would be to get that comp plan passed in Delaware, or through the Delaware Supreme Court, or a new one. You haven't been paid, I believe, since 2018.
Yeah.
Where are you
7 years.
Where are you on?
7 years with zero pay,
Although, to be fair, if it goes through, you're going to have an enormous payday. It'll be fine. It'll be more money than anybody's ever made.
I suppose so. But let's just say that if any CEO of the Fortune 500 were to agree to a plan like the one that I agreed to, you should buy the stock of that company immediately.
No, I remember it at the time. To be fair, the targets were so far above where the stock was, and obviously they were met.
Yes.
Is the board working, to your knowledge, on another potential plan if, in fact, the one never gets out of Delaware, the Supreme Court rules against the chancellor's ruling?
I don't want to speak on behalf of the board, but I'm sure it's on their mind. But I can't comment on Tesla board deliberations.
You said earlier, you want to stay as CEO. Why not? I've wondered, Elon, given all the heat you've gotten in a lot of ways, why not sort of become like an Ellison-like figure at Tesla? Obviously, you're a lot younger, but still, he's very influential at Oracle. But, he's not CEO and he doesn't get the attention, at least not in title.
I think maybe a better term for, I'm a huge fan of Larry Ellison, he's a good friend of mine. Owner, I think would be,
yes.
He's the owner of Oracle.
Yes, he is. And he has a lot of it.
Yeah.
Finally, I want to...
So the CEO, he's just the owner.
Yeah. It's a big percentage, a lot higher than yours, actually, at Tesla.
Yes, an impressive percentage at Oracle.
Finally, I want to, so many things we haven't gotten to, but we're trying to keep to your time. Are we ready for the changes that AI is going to bring to this society? I try my job every day to sort of follow them. Obviously, they've been pushed aside to a certain extent by issues of the day.
Yeah.
It's coming fast. And
it's coming very fast. I feel like we're in the big bang of the intelligence explosion. Like we have courtside seats to the big bang of intelligence explosion. One thing's for sure, it won't be boring.
No.
So if
you don't seem to be saying there's a 20% chance of annihilation as often anymore.
I think we should always consider that there's some chance of a bad outcome to try to protect against the bad outcomes. We don't want to be complacent and say that everything's just going to be fine. There's no chance of a bad outcome. I sort of think of this maybe in movie terms as like, are we in a Star Trek movie, or are we in a Gene Roddenberry movie or a James Cameron movie? Which movie are we in here? And if you could either have a Roddenberry or a Cameron outcome. I think in this case, we want the Roddenberry outcome.
Yeah. And the abundance that may come with it. You going to miss the White House at all or not?
My rough plan on the White House is to be there for a couple of days every few weeks.
Yeah.
And to be helpful where I can be helpful.